أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Praise to the Lord of the universe, who created men and women from a single soul and made no distinction among them but piety and knowledge. Dear sisters and brothers, our Afghan youth around the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Farid Younos from Hammayit 24, broadcasting from Canada. And today is March the 22nd, 2021, and Happy Nowruz. Today I will be with you for half an hour, not 45 minutes, because I have to take my second dose of vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, the second dose, and I have an appointment. And I didn't want to cancel that appointment because it's very hard to get an appointment. So I'll be with you a half an hour, but in this half an hour, we will discuss Nowruz and Happy New Year, Happy New Year of 1400 Islamic solar calendar, and Happy Nowruz, which is a beautiful celebration for 5,000 years. And of course, I need to tell you about a little bit about the history of Nowruz and the history of the Islamic solar calendar. Nowruz has been in the territory of Afghanistan, Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkey, all these Middle Eastern countries for 4,000, 5,000 years. It's not something new that we should ignore, because that is the very strong cultural value we have in the region. In celebration of nature, it hasn't got anything to do with deen, meaning quote unquote religion, or Islam. Actually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to appreciate nature, love nature, enjoy nature. So there's nothing to do when we do all this celebration, and there are some sects of Islam, especially the Wahhabis and Salafis and all, that they call it bid'ah or kufr or shirk. That's not true at all, because the celebration of nature, appreciating nature, enjoying nature, love of nature, not abusing nature, it is part of our deen. So Nowruz celebration, it is part of not only Afghan or Iranian or Middle Eastern culture, but it is part of human nature, because of spring coming and revitalize nature, brings new hope, and that you have heard a lot about these things. But what I'm telling you this today is about the calendar, that this Islamic solar calendar, we have Islamic lunar calendar and Islamic solar calendar. Islamic solar calendar was made by a mathematician, Omar Khayyam. His total complete name is Omar Khayyam Naishapuri, and his colleague Abul Abbas Logari. Logari is in south of Kabul. These two men in 467 Islamic lunar calendar, in the time of Seljuqian, the dynasty of Seljuqi, actually the name of Malik Shah Jalal Seljuqi, that was his time, and his wazir or the prime minister. His name was Nizam al-Mulk Tusi. Nizam al-Mulk Tusi, that he was the prime minister of Saljuqi, the Jalaluddin Saljuqi, and what he appointed Omar Khayyam and Logari to work on Islamic solar calendar, meaning converting the lunar calendar to Islamic solar calendar. These two mathematicians, they worked very hard for some time, and then they figured out that March 15, 1079 of Christian era correspond to first of spring. So the reason behind this was that Muslims of Khurasan, of the region, because at that time there was no Iran and there was no Afghanistan, but there was, of course, Khurasan. The whole region was Khurasan. So these two men initiated this project simply because people were celebrating springs anyway. Because for thousands of years, they were celebrating spring. So they come up with this beautiful idea to convert the lunar calendar to solar calendar based on the migration of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So they should celebrate spring and the new year. So in the first calculation, they come up with March 15th. But very shortly, they noticed that there is a mistake. So they recalculated and worked harder about this. And this is 1,000 years ago. So they worked hard on this, and then they come up with March 21st to be the first day of spring. And that was determined, that March 21st is the first day of spring. So what they did, they combined the Nowruz celebration with New Year celebration. But and that was determined. So Omar Khayyam and Abu Abbas al-Lugari, they both achieved a very great scientific principle at that time. But for many, many centuries, this calendar was not adopted in the region for a variety of reasons. But on the 20th century, just 100 years ago, 20th century, in the very beginning of 20th century, both Iran and Afghanistan, they decided to adopt this new calendar, which called Taqwim Jalali calendar. Why? Because they noticed that it's much easier for administration purposes, because in the lunar calendar, the year changes, every year changes 10 days. And it is also the beginning of the new year. So that correspond to Nowruz celebration and festival. So that was the second reason. And the third reason was this, that it was based on the migration of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Mecca to Medina. And remember this, that the Islamic lunar calendar was not set up or initiated at the time of the Prophet. At the time of the Prophet, the month were existed, like Ramadan, Shawwal, and all these names of the month, they were existed, but Islamic calendar did not exist. So what's here important here to remember, that the Islamic calendar was initiated after his death. After his death. And Muslims got together and they discussed and consulted with each other how to create an Islamic calendar. And that was based on the lunar system, because the month already existed. But the Islamic calendar started with they all agreed upon that instead of his birth, or instead of the first revelation of the Quran, or instead of the time that he, for the first time, propagated Islam, instead of all this, let's make the Islamic calendar based on hijrah, meaning migration. Because Islamic civilization actually developed out of migration. And if you look at the history of the world, all civilization is based upon migration. People moved from point A to point B. So one thing that it's important to remember is that Islamic lunar calendar that's based on the cycle of the moon, that was set up after the pass away or death of the Prophet. So there's nothing wrong to create a solar calendar to make our administration, agricultural, and all that easier. And that's what in the region, Iran and Afghanistan, adopted this calendar, and now we have Islamic solar calendar, which called Jalali. But there was when both countries adopted this calendar, there was a difference, a very, very small difference. The difference was this, that Iranians adopted the old names of the month from the ancient time, like Urdi-Behesht, Isfand, or whatever they have. In Afghans, they adopted Hamal, Saur, Jawza, Saratan from the zodiac symbols, the zodiac symbols. And that's the only difference. But both now the whole region celebrates, and Nowruz is also recognized by the United Nations as an official calendar in the world. And so this way, a few things happened here with the creation of Islamic solar calendar, or Taqwim Jalali, or Jalali calendar. First of all, they brought, as I said, the celebration of Nowruz, which was a very ancient tradition to celebrate nature. They combined it with a New Year. But this New Year is also Islamic New Year. So it's not something like infidelity or shirk or anything like that. But of course, the Wahhabis and Salafis and all, they reject that. They say that, no, you have to have only Islamic calendar. But they don't have a logical reason behind it, because Muslims of the region, like Omar Khayyam and Abu al-Abbas al-Lugari and Saljuqiyan, the dynasty of Saljuqi, they were Muslims too. They created a calendar based on the migration of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from Mecca to Medina, just like the Muslims after the death of the Prophet created lunar calendar. So there's nothing here against Deen or Islam or our values, so we combined our traditional, this is the beauty of it. Sorry, this is the beauty of it. We combine the tradition of Nowruz with New Year, and most importantly, that this is an Islamic celebration, that we not only celebrate nature, we celebrate New Year, and it's a fixed time, and because it doesn't change like the lunar calendar 10 days every year. But at the same time, they say that we celebrate our religious festivals based upon the lunar calendar, like Ramadan, either Ramadan or Eid al-Adha, we celebrate based on the lunar calendar. But for our administration purposes, agricultural purposes, New Year celebration of spring, we use this calendar. And remember that 21st of March is equinox, meaning that there's a day and night is equal. So it's equinox. So there are some scientific principles in this. There's traditional principle in this. There is Islamic tradition in this. And this is a great achievement of Muslims of non-Arab origin. And also you need to know that most prominent Muslims scholars were emerged not from Arabs, but from non-Arabs. That's also, they don't want to admit, that the most important and the most prominent and the most distinguished scholars of Islam emerged out of the Arab lands. And those were, like Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa, that his nickname is Imam Jahan, the Imam of the world. He was born in a suburb north of Kabul, in Afghanistan of today, for example. So, in Imam Abu Hanifa never ever rejected Nowruz, that Nowruz is infidelity, or Nowruz is shirk, or Nowruz is bid'ah. And he was one of the most prominent, and he is, because he has many followers around the world, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Muslims of India, in part of Muslims of Indonesia, Egypt. He has many followers around the world. So he did not reject that Nowruz is infidelity or kufr or bid'ah or anything like that. So you, our African youth, should know. And I just heard that some of our youth are not interested in Afghan affairs and some of them Afghan culture and all that, or Islamic culture. I don't blame them because they were not told by their parents or the community. The scientific, even some traditions have some scientific values, and they were not celebrated in some of homes. Why some Afghan youth celebrate these things and some of them don't? Simply because those who do not celebrate or do not value their own culture, and they are deprived themselves from their own culture. This is because they were not told the stories of their culture at home or by the community, and that's why I thank and appreciate Nasir John Khaled that we come up with this idea that I should speak a few words in English, simply because we should spread the true word of Islam in our culture and sometimes our history. So you should be familiar with, because being a minority in these countries like Canada, United States and all, it's not a liability, it's an asset. That's also something that many Afghans misunderstood. They think that when they are in minority group, they have disadvantages. No, that's not true. Being a minority is not a liability, it's an asset. You have to invest on it. You have to share these values with others, and they will enjoy it. Some of you speak, probably cannot write, but speak fluently Farsi. That's an asset. Reading the poem of Maulana, Saadi, Hafiz, other Farsi poet, that is an asset. That's a value that you have when you learn how to read these. So some of you think that being a minority is not good, and you have to assimilate with the dominant culture. There are a lot of good values within the dominant culture, and there are very bad values within the dominant culture. So our challenge is that we should adopt the good values of the dominant culture and reject the bad values of the dominant culture, and not totally assimilate. Because when you totally assimilate, that is sometimes the dominant culture, the mainstream culture may not accept you. But when you have your own value system, they know that you have some values of your own, and they respect you for who you are. So this is very important for you to understand, that some of you may think that this is not a good thing to be always Afghan or Muslims. No, Islam has its own values, and especially that Islamic value is very universal. You can be a good Muslim anywhere in the world. What does Islam teach you? Islam teaches you to be kind to others. That does not mean that you should be kind only to Muslims. No. When it teaches that you need to be kind to others, meaning everybody, you need to respect and love your neighbor, respect and your parents, respect your teachers, be neat and clean all the time, be polite all the time, work very hard, study very hard, because the foundation of Islam, as we said in the last 2-3 shows, the foundation of Islam is knowledge. And cooperate with each other, cooperate with other groups as a Muslim, because Islam is universal. And this universality gave you a big asset of values and culture and moral principles. So what Islam forbid is lust, alcohol, drugs, lying, cheating, not working hard, not studying. These are the things that Islam prohibits, and those are because of your own good. So there's a lot of good things within the value system of Canada, and there are a lot of good things with the value system of Americans, and there are a lot of good things with our values, like our hospitality. For example, one of them. But Islam is very universal. You can be a good Muslim anywhere in the world, and people will, when you show your values, who you are, they will respect you. Like the one of our young ladies in Canada. I think her name is Mariam John. She became a minister of democratic affairs or something like this in Canada. Or a Sikh, that his origin is a religion of Sikhs. He became the minister of defense. So, but they invested on their own value system. And again, what I'm telling you, that you have to learn your own value system and invest on it. See it as an asset, not a liability. And that is how you make big progress. I came to the United States 41 years ago. And at that time, I knew that my name is Muhammad Farid Younos. I didn't change my name because that was a beautiful name that my parents gave it to me. So I didn't call myself Fred, or I didn't call myself Mo, short of Muhammad. No, because those are my values. But I worked hard and I went to school. And I emerged as a Muslim researcher, and I achieved my goals too. So don't think that being an Afghan, or especially a Muslim, because Afghan, again, it is not universal, but being a good Muslim is universal. You can achieve a lot of things with your own value system, because people would love you and respect you because of your own values. Those who are prejudiced and favor discrimination and they are biased, they are ignorant people. But you should not be surrounded by ignorant people. You should always try to surround yourself with good people, that they appreciate you. But if you deprive yourself from your own culture, you know what happens? You fall into a cultural gap. You fall into a cultural gap. You are neither a Canadian or American or European, nor a Muslim. So that's a cultural gap. And that is the danger. Because at that time, you are nobody. At that time, you are nobody. So make sure that I brought this topic of Taqweem Jalali calendar for, so you understand the history of Taqweem Jalali, how it came to us in 467 Hijri Qamari, that's 1,000 years ago, and it's based on Islamic calendar. So you should know these things. If we do not know our own history, if we do not know our own culture, if we do not know our own values, that is the time that we could also be exploited, because a person that does not have any value, that he or she can be exploited very easily, because they know that he does not have a base, he does not have a value, and they can exploit you. But if you invest on your culture, invest on your values, know about your history, know about your culture, practice your culture moderately, dress properly, be polite to everybody, and at the same time, work very hard, cooperate with everybody. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'll see you next time. Farid Younos, thank you very much. See you next Tuesday. Assalamu alaikum.